Boxing philosophy is about understanding, in a specific sense, understanding the motion in the ring. And it's about questions. For example, many years ago, Socrates revolutionized understanding simply by asking questions. And we ask questions, but in the boxing context, like, who has the best jab in boxing? Is it Larry Holmes? Is it Lennox Lewis? Who has the best left hook to the body? And who is the best counterpuncher? And who has the best boxing IQ? Because boxing is about psychology, it's about contracts, it's about business, it's about passion, and ultimately it's about understanding the multifarious layers within the boxing context. The dark truth about boxing injuries, and it's not just about Coase. Now, since the Moses Atama injury, which I believe was a bicep injury, I've been thinking about the effect and the negative impact that injuries have on boxing. And I've come to the conclusion that injuries are like a byproduct of boxing. They're just simply a part of the sport. And in a sense, injuries are a part of many sports at the elite level. So let's give some reference points. So when you think of Joe Calzaghe, great fighter, one of the greatest British fighters, if not the greatest British fighter of all time, he had hand injuries. Floyd Mayweather had hand injuries or hand problems. And Riddick Bowe, I believe, had hand injuries as well. Of course, boxing, you use your full body, but you use your hands to punch. Now, in the case of Joe Calzaghe and Floyd Mayweather, they made adjustments to their style to be able to deal with that issue. So if you notice the evolution of Calzaghe, he would take the power of the punches, and that's why people would call him a slapper. But the reality was that he was an innovator because he evolved his style to be able to continue his path in boxing. Of course, from an outsider looking in, and for people looking to criticize him, they would use that analogy, but it was incorrect. Or, how can I put this? They were not understanding the context. Again, Floyd Mayweather, we have a similar situation. If you look at Floyd Mayweather before his hand injuries or his hand problems, he put more venom behind the punches. But then he adapted his style to be able to maintain and continue his boxing career. But again, hand injuries are a part of boxing. And that's quite obvious because you're continuously punching people, whether you're punching people in the ring in official fights or you're punching sparring partners. And then you have Mike Tyson, and Mike Tyson had chronic back problems. And again, chronic back problems will affect your stance. It will probably affect your punch resistance. It will affect your ability to even walk, let alone compete at an elite level. And then we have my favorite fighter, Evander Holyfield. Now, Evander Holyfield had a variety of injuries, and we'll speak about two of them. In the first Michael Moorer fight, he had a heart issue. He had an issue with his heart. And even though he had an issue with his heart, he was still able to go 12 rounds with Michael Moorer, which is absolutely exceptional. Of course, Evander Holyfield is probably one of the mentally strongest boxers that ever lived. When you think of mentally strong boxers, you think of Evander Holyfield, you think of Rocky Marciano, you think of Muhammad Ali, and many others. But he's mentally a very strong person. But he had this heart problem when he fought Michael Moorer in 1994. And then he had shoulder injuries. I believe it was the left shoulder. If you know anything about Evander Holyfield, he had a great left hook, and he threw his left hook. And particularly early in his career, in the cruiserweight, and in the early heavyweight days, he would throw a lot of punches. So clearly, how would a shoulder injury affect your career? Well, it will affect you. It will affect your output of punches. So it will affect you throwing punches. It will affect your ability to block punches. So again, this is another instance where a boxing injury can have a negative effect. And injuries they're not the only fighters to get injured. You have Sugar Ray Leonard, the great Sugar Ray Leonard, who had great performances. Off the top of my head, I can think of his performance against Tommy Hearns and Marvelous Hagler. All three of those were great fighters. But Sugar Ray Leonard, his first retirement, and he had many retirements, but his first retirement was based on a detached retina. Clearly, this would affect his vision. So, if you have a detached retina, that's going to be a massive issue with regards to seeing punches and your ability to take punches. So Sugar Ray Leonard had that detached retina issue, which caused his first retirement. And then you had Kell Brook. And I thought Kell Brook was a great British fighter, and he had accomplished a lot. He was a champion, but I kind of feel like he could have accomplished even more. I felt like the circumstances around the Triple G fight hindered his career. But he had a broken orbital bone, and I believe that really hindered his progress. Even with that injury, he was still a great British champion. But that really hindered his progression or his ability to go even further on in the sport, even though he still had a great career that he can be proud of. And then we have Andre Ward. From the British perspective, you would be familiar with Andre Ward, who fought Carl Froch, another great fighter. And Andre Ward had a great performance against Carl Froch. It was really a masterclass. And Carl Froch is a big puncher, but he just nullified his jab, nullified his right hand. And yeah, he just outpointed him. But Andre Ward had shoulder injuries. And I believe he had an injury in the Carl Froch fight. However, you wouldn't know it, judging by how he performed. But apparently his injuries actually cut his career short, which is such a shame. Andre Ward, of course, had that great sequence of performances, particularly the rematch against Sergey Kovalev. It's really important to remember that when Andre Ward fought Kovalev, he was undefeated, he was a knockout artist, and he was very feared. So he faced a different Kovalev to the Kovalev that fought against Canelo, respectfully speaking. So like I said, injuries. When we think of injuries, they're a byproduct of boxing. If you're going to get involved in boxing at the professional level or even at the amateur level, you will probably get some type of injury. And injuries, of course, they have physical consequences. They have economic consequences. So they don't just affect you, they affect your team. They affect management. There's a massive domino effect. They can destroy careers. And it reinforces this notion. To me, it reinforces the notion that boxing is such a dangerous sport. But when you think of boxing, or when I think of boxing as a dangerous sport, mostly you think it's dangerous because of the punches that you take to the head and the punches that you take to the body. And that's a reasonable conclusion, but it's also dangerous because of other aspects. And one of those aspects is the injuries that are sustained. And also, and this is quite a scary thing, no matter how elite your team is, you can get injured. You can't 100% reduce the chance of being injured. Look at Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield had a very elite and scientific approach to his training, yet he still sustained an injury. It reminds me how mortal human beings are. No matter how much money you invest, things can still go wrong. There is no such thing as perfection. And then the question becomes, where do these injuries occur? Where do they occur? I would say they occur predominantly in camp, in sparring, and obviously you can get injuries in the ring. So this leads to a very important question, which is, can we reduce injuries in boxing? Or how do we reduce injuries in boxing? And again, it goes back to this philosophy that you can only reduce, not eliminate. Maybe some people may disagree with that premise. And if they do, I'd be interested to hear their explanation. But in this current time, you can reduce, not eliminate. One way to reduce injuries is to do what they call technical sparring. Technical sparring, from my understanding, is sparring with 50 to 70% effort. You can also do what some call body sparring, which is punching to the body as opposed to punch to the head. You can also reduce hard sparring. Every gym has different cultures. So some trainers advocate hard sparring, very hard, brutal sparring. Allegedly, James Toney would engage in very hard sparring. And hard sparring toughens you up from a physical perspective, from a spiritual perspective, from a psychological perspective, but it can exacerbate the risk of being injured. So if you reduce hard sparring, you're likely to get less eye injuries, like not get cut, less injuries like getting broken ribs or anything like that, and fewer concussions. And also, another way to reduce injuries is to have that boxer philosophy. And what is that philosophy? Well, it's the boxers who use intelligent defense. They absorb less cumulative brain damage. Let me say that again. Boxers that use intelligent defense, they absorb less cumulative damage. And when we think of defense, what is defense? Defense is an accumulation of things, whether it's head movement, footwork, controlling distance, clinching. These are parts, these are things, these are tools that we can use to use efficient defense. And when you think of great defensive fighters, I think of various people. I think of Pernell Whitaker, got to put him up there. Floyd Mayweather, what a great defensive fighter he was. And then, of course, you can't, you got your Sugar Ray Robinsons, who, arguably the greatest fighter of all time. And there are other protocols, basic protocols, such as proper wraps, bigger gloves. The bigger the gloves, the less likely you're going to knock someone out, the less likely you're going to cut someone. And then regular hand and strength mobility work if you're having hand issues. And of course, proper recovery, 7 to 9 hours sleep. And then you've got things like physio checks, nutritionists, and, proper nutritionists and scientific supervision. So all of these things can be put in place and they can reduce the ability of getting injured. But that's the key thing. You can only reduce the prospect of getting injured. You cannot eliminate. And when you put in these protocols to reduce the prospect of getting injured, this is financial investment. But I would state that that financial investment is worth it. Shakur versus Lopez. The psychological war has begun. Let's first start from Shakur's perspective. I was watching an interview on Shakur, and he stated that the mind is his biggest strength. Now, in any walk of life or in any type of elite sports or in the corporate world or in any world, the mind is important. So for him to rate his mind as his strongest asset, that in itself shows him to be a formidable force. And he's also stated that the Lopez fight, the Teofimo Lopez fight, is the fight that he's been waiting for. So he's been waiting for this moment. So that would indicate to me that he's prepared. He's not taking it lightly. And he feels that no one can beat him. This is a typical mantra of a boxer, but it's an important philosophy of a boxer because it emanates confidence. And for you to have a chance to win, confidence is an essential part of that process. If you're looking at the recipe for success, confidence is part of the ingredients. It's not the only ingredient, but it's definitely an ingredient that's necessary. And he also stated that he wants to fight the Ring Magazine champion, which is Lopez, and therefore there's no cherry picking. And if there's one thing that boxing fans can't stand, it's cherry picking. So that to me shows a character of bravery, taking a risk. And he states that he wants to put himself in a position where they have no choice but to respect him. I guess they are the boxing fans, the boxing critics, maybe the whole boxing ecosystem. And there was 2 ideas here that I thought was really interesting that Shakur spoke about. The first one was that speed means nothing when it's inaccurate. I think that's quite a powerful statement because speed is essential in boxing. But how essential is it if it's inaccurate? And the second one is the old philosophy that he operates on the system of hit and not being hit. So what I get from this is that Shakur is stating all the correct things that you would want to hear from a fighter. Now let's talk about that face-off. Now in a face-off, What's the purpose of a face-off? Well, a face-off is a marketing tool to build the fight, no doubt about that. But also you can get a feeling for the fighter's psychology. So there's the perspective of viewing the fighters, but also there's the fighters getting a feeling for each other. And you can kind of get that feeling for, is your opponent confident? Are they not confident? And you get an understanding of who they are. Now, what's interesting and what transpired in this face-off is that Shakur and Lopez actually have a history. They know each other. And Shakur stated that he had an expectation that they were going to meet. There was no intimidation tactics in this face-off. Both were actually complementary. Lopez's narrative was that, you were a dominant force. I think he said from 114 to 123 to 135, you were top tier. But then he's questioning how will he operate at this weight division, which leads to a good question. Will the weight be significant? Will it help or hinder Shakur? Lopez was also challenged by Shakur on some previous statements that he had made. And what was interesting here, and this is probably an insight into Lopez's psychology, was that he was kind of retracting on the statements. He was being quite passive about his previous statements. And Shakur also questioned the Lomachenko victory. To give some context, Teofimo Lopez gave Lomachenko, the great Lomachenko, his first defeat. It was a great, spectacular performance. But Shakur gave him credit for the victory, but then questioned the nature of the victory. And I feel like out of the two, Shakur spoke with the authority. Lopez was soft-spoken. That might be a reflection of their personalities, their natural personalities. Shakur, I found out, is statistically the best defensive fighter in boxing. And the one thing that Teofimo Lopez did indicate was that he may get a bit dirty. And Shakur's response was that anything dirty will be reciprocated. And I thought that was a good, confident response. And like I said, Lopez's language was quite vague. And maybe the intention here is to keep his cards very close to his chest, or it might be a reflection of his actual personality or language style, etc. But Shakur's perspective, it was more direct. He was confident. And he had this objective, this clear understanding that he wants people to know that he is the best. Lopez's response was more passive. It was more, ambiguous. And maybe I was thinking about this in reflection. Maybe the objective is to cause confusion. Because if you're dealing with a confident character, maybe you want to cause some type of confusion. So either ambiguity is part of his character, or it's part of his strategy, or it's a combination of both. Here's some observations. Not taking ownership of previous comments can be seen as a sign of weakness. So there's different perspectives of that. Is it a sign of weakness, or is it a strategy? Now remember, face-offs are an opportunity for promotion. Think of the AJ Dillian White. That was a great face-off. Think of the Klitschko David Haye. That was an explosive face-off. But they can also be opportunities to score psychological points. When Tyson Fury and Klitschko had a face-off for the first fight, Tyson Fury told a story of them both being in a sauna and how he lasted longer in the sauna. And he indicated very clearly that this illustrates that he is stronger mentally, that he has a stronger heart. So he was trying to plant a psychological seed that he is the stronger man. But let's not forget that winning a face-off does not necessarily mean that you're winning a fight. Think of the Kell Brook Amir Khan face-off. Many people thought Amir Khan won the face-off, but Kell Brook definitely won the fight. But again, you can get a feel. You can get a feel for someone's spirit in a good or negative way. And face-offs can be opportunities for redemption. Think of the Carl Froch Groves 2 face-off. In the first face-off, Groves was very dominant. But in the second face-off, Carl Froch prepared. He appointed a sports psychologist, and he psychologically dominated the second face-off. So from the Carl Froch perspective, the face-off was an opportunity for redemption. And of course, it was a great marketing tool for their fight, which was a massive fight within the British boxing ecosystem. So what I'll say is that this is a great fight potentially, because these are both very credible fighters, both champions, and they both have great CVs. One thing that comes to mind is that styles make fights. I always think of this. George Foreman, the great George Foreman. He beat Frazier, he beat Ken Norton within 2 rounds. But then he lost to Muhammad Ali in 8 rounds, famously in Africa. But then Ali lost to Frazier and Ken Norton. Yes, he beat Frazier twice. Yes, he beat Ken Norton twice, but he also lost to those opponents. So styles make fights. And this is the intrigue about this fight, because they're both high-level fighters, arguably both elite fighters, but how the styles gel. And I have high anticipation for this one, and hopefully it will deliver. So I have 2 questions. Tony Sims, can he save Daniel Dubois? That's question 1. And the problem, what is the problem with Daniel Dubois' return? That's question 2. Now, I would argue, and I think a lot of people would concur with this, that Daniel Dubois, he needs help, or maybe he needs help. But not help with technique like throwing a jab or throwing a straight right. He needs help psychologically. He needs help with his confidence. Maybe we all need help in this department. But I feel like Daniel Dubois, this is an essential component that he needs help with. Now, managing the fighter relationship, I think, is difficult, or more difficult in the Daniel Dubois context, because not only are you managing the relationship with him, you're also managing the relationship with the father, because the father has such a close relationship with his son, which is understandable. Any loving father would want to guide their son. That's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. And they clearly have a close relationship. Now, when we talk about Tony Sims in today's context, Tony Sims, I think, has done a great job with Conor Benn. In the Eubank fights, in the Eubank Junior fights, he did a great job. In the first fight, I think Conor Benn performed well. And I think the second fight, even though that there's a caveat there with regards to Eubank Junior, still Conor Benn had gained experience and he implemented a good strategy. And we have to give Conor Benn credit, and we also have to give Tony Sims credit. So, and on top of that, Tony Sims has done a good rebuilding job with Craig Richards, also known as Spider. Craig Richards recently had a win over Dan Aziz, which puts him back at the top of the British light heavyweight ecosystem. And I'm really intrigued to see what happens with Craig Richards, because I believe he has a lot of talent. So in a sense, when we talk about Tony Sims, he has harvested a great boxing environment where it comes to atmosphere, fighters' energy, etc. And Daniel Dubois, he can benefit from this. And it's so important that he soaks this in. And of course, Tony Sims, being a teacher, a trainer, will have a philosophy. He'll have a boxing style. But like I said before, this is not just about teaching a style. It's more about building up someone psychologically. And part of that is having effective communication, not just having communication, but effective communication. Think of this. A salesperson needs to be taught how to sell. A boxer needs to be taught how to box. That sounds obvious. That seems logical. But Daniel Dubois doesn't need to be taught how to box. I mean, he's a former world champion. He needs to rebuild his confidence. He needs to build him up psychologically. So it's not a simple equation. Brendan Ingle understood the importance of this, by the way. He understood the importance of building up fighters in terms of building their confidence, raising them up. This is what Robert Greene calls the Pygmalion effect. So that environment If a boxing environment can raise you up psychologically, that is essential. That's an essential ingredient. Now, let's be honest. Daniel Dubois is a great talent. He could become champion again. Definitely. Strong jab. He's got really good power. He can knock you out. He has got good underrated power. Sorry, he's got a strong jab. He's got good power. He's got underrated counter-punching abilities. He's got good footwork. He also has good punch resistance. And now he has championship experience. He has experience at the championship level. And against Anthony Joshua, he looked fantastic. He actually looked like the future against Anthony Joshua. Now, I was watching an interview with Daniel Dubois with iFilm London, and I was looking for things in this interview because this was a recent interview. And what I was looking for was, is he confident? Is he awkward? Is there any changes in his demeanor? And in the interview, he was in the actual gym, and I felt like he looked comfortable. He looked very comfortable, and he was saying all the right things. He was saying that he's open to new ideas, which is important when you're getting with a new trainer, because the likelihood is that they're going to input new ideas. And he states that he feels like he's learning. And how good is a boxing gym if you're not learning? And he says that the environment is good. It's a good fighting environment, and that's good. And he has familiarity with it. And he also talks about his ambition to get the title back and to fight anyone. They posed the question about would he fight Fabio Wardley, and he categorically said yes. There was no fear there. There was no hesitation, if my recollection serves me correct. And he looked happy and he looked confident. And he made this reference point, and I think it's important. And he was talking about leaving the past in the past. And sometimes our past can create demons that can negatively affect our future. And it seems like this philosophy of leaving the past in the past, if he follows that, that will be beneficial. He also talked about taking things more seriously, and whatever we pursue in life, whether it's a career in art, acting, YouTube, boxing, or any elite sport, it's always important to take it seriously. And he states that he is taking it seriously. And he's saying all the right things. So to me, I came away from that interview feeling more confident about Daniel Dubois' future. Now, of course, there are adjustments that they're going to have to deal with the development with Daniel Dubois. I think the first thing is dealing with the psychology. It looks like they're already working on that. But also he needs to be able to deal with the jab. So in the Joy Joyce fight, he really struggled with the jab. So he needs to be dealing with that, or he needs to be able to deal with that. He also needs to, even though he's a good counterpuncher, when he went up against an elite counterpuncher, i.e. Usyk, he struggled. So it's about continuously developing his counterpunching ability. And he also needs to learn, he can solve puzzles at the British level, even at the championship level, but he needs to learn to solve puzzles at the elite level. And of course, I'm using puzzles in a figurative way. And I feel like, what is the ambition, or what is the end goal for Daniel Dubois? Realistically, where can he go? And I think that he can be a massive part of the boxing ecosystem. He can be a massive part of the British heavyweight ecosystem, but the boxing ecosystem in general. He's an exciting fighter. There's potentials for great rivalries. And remember, he has a fan favorite style. He's not a boxer that just beats you on the jab and is just Mr. Technical. He can knock you out. And I think it's good as well, because as the interview progressed, it became transparent in this interview that he has a rapport with Tony Sims. He's known him since 18, and I didn't know that. So he's got this good rapport. He's learning new things. He's developing his confidence. And that's a great addition. And of course, his team has changed. And the obvious change is the trainer. And then there's Sam Jones as well. I believe that's the name of his promoter. So there's these new additions to his team. Again, there's some important factors here. Managing this psychologically effectively, or managing Daniel Dubois' psychology effectively, which is a byproduct of having great communication, teaching him how to deal with puzzles on the elite level, building his confidence. And I feel that managing that relationship between him and his father, you don't want to isolate the father, because I think the father is an important part of Daniel Dubois' identity. I think he looks to his father for strength. So it's important to maintain that, but at the same time, manage the relationship where it doesn't interfere with Tony Sim's guidance. And I think there's massive potential for Daniel Dubois. Wilder versus Chisora, the fight we didn't know that we needed. Now, here's a question. Can Chisora survive the Bronze Bomber? Can he survive the Bronze Bomber? Because he's still one of the hardest punchers in heavyweight history. Therefore, by default, is probably the hardest puncher in the division. And this would be a great fight. Derek Chisora versus Deontay Wilder potentially will be a great fight. What would it be billed? Is it power against power? Britain versus USA? Maybe that's a bit too political. But Derek Chisora, from his perspective, I guess, you have someone who creates a minimal target. And from Derek's perspective, he's probably thinking, right, I can create a minimal target by bobbing low. I can rough him up and I can take his heart. Because if you look at previous Deontay Wilder fights, you might come to the conclusion that, yes, this person, he can be beaten mentally. And that's not to take anything away from Deontay Wilder. Obviously, every boxer that steps in the ring has a level of mental toughness, but he was definitely unhinged in the Tyson Fury trilogy. But then you get Deontay Wilder's perspective, again, who's a former champion. And from his perspective, he's thinking, if I land the right hand, the knockout will come, and this will open the doors to even bigger and better opportunities. And remember, and this is a key thing, Derek Chisora, he minimizes the target as opposed to getting away from the target with his feet. That could be a nightmare strategy against Deontay Wilder, because you want to make Deontay Wilder miss. You don't want to block it. You want to make him miss because he has that type of power. Here's a question. Who is more confident? Is Deontay Wilder more confident? Is Derek Chisora more confident? And who is more vulnerable? Some would argue that Deontay Wilder is more vulnerable. Can Derek Chisora survive if he gets hit with that big right hand? Will his, that minimal style of creating a minimal target, will that backfire because of the immense strength of Deontay Wilder? Or will he simply just catch the punches and be able to return fire? Will he adopt a different strategy? Maybe he will use the step back to try and nullify Deontay's power. Will Deontay use a strategy that Lennox Lewis used against Evander Holyfield, which is when you're fighting a guy who minimizes the target, instead of aiming for the chin, you aim for the temple? So will he be able to make those adjustments? And can Derek Chisora take away Deontay Wilder's right hand? But can Deontay Wilder deal with the pressure? And when I say the pressure, I'm not just talking about the punches. I'm talking about the potential magnitude of the event. How much punch resistance does Deontay Wilder have? He took a lot of punishment against Tyson Fury. He didn't take a lot of punishments against Joseph Parker. That was more of a strategic fight. But then he was knocked out or stopped by Zhilei Zhang. And what are the motivations of both men? I feel like Derek Chisora's motivation is to leave on a high, to leave on the top of the mountain, so to speak, to have that great retirement fight. But what is Deontay Wilder's motivations? Is it financial? Is it cultural? Is it to win back the title? Is it a combination of all those things? And I think what his motivations are will determine how he approaches this fight, will determine how he trains, will determine the level of passion and commitment that he has. And you can make an argument that Derek Chisora throughout the years has made some technical improvements against Usyk, arguably one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. He made technical adjustments. He turned southpaw. He had some good counters. He got distance or I should say he got in range to land that overhand right, and I felt that he was very effective in that fight. So you have those technical adjustments. Plus, against Joe Joyce, he showed that counter right hand, particularly in round 10 when he scored the knockdown. He still minimizes the target. He bobs and weaves. There's a puzzle to be solved with Derek Chisora. And Derek has that warrior mindset. There is no fear. Or if there is fear, he controls it very well. Deontay Wilder has the power. There's no doubt about that. He has the power, but does he have the will? Does he have the will to win? Does he have the will to go through the jungle? Derek Chisora, like I said, he has that incentive to retire on a high. And Derek Chisora's punch creativity can definitely cause Deontay Wilder some serious problems. Here's some things to bear in mind. The marketing of this fight will be important. And both fighters are very good at marketing. Derek Chisora, he's good at marketing, but through his antics and through sometimes his, what some would say, inappropriate behavior. While Wilder is a good talker, Wilder did a great job. Let's be honest, in the Wilder-Tyson trilogy, they both did a great job in marketing that fight. That fight was a huge cultural event, and both need to be credited with that. And this fight has the branding. You have Derek Chisora, the warrior, the person that loves to fight, the fan-friendly fighter. And then you have Deontay Wilder, the knockout artist. So they both have credibility. Deontay Wilder has massive virality due to his knockouts. But here's another question. When we look at the setups of both fighters, who is Deontay Wilder's trainer? And will that trainer be effective? To my knowledge, he is split with Malik Scott. And if this is a different trainer, will they be able to create an optimal boxing environment so that Deontay Wilder can be the best version of himself? And I think that's an important question, because if Deontay Wilder is going to have a successful comeback, he needs to be the best version of himself. He needs to get back to what he was. Because what he is, or what he's been in his last couple of fights, has been fairly unimpressive, and it's a puzzle that's easy to solve. I felt like the Joseph Parker fight was so disappointing because he was unable or unwilling to roll the dice. He accepted defeat. He didn't take chances. He didn't, take that significant step to say, you know what, I'm losing the fight, so I'm gonna really take some risks here. And I think many people question the psychology of Deontay Wilder for a variety of reasons. Again, this doesn't mean that he's not mentally tough, and it doesn't mean that just because you might have been weaker in the past doesn't mean that you can't be stronger in the present or the future. But it might mean that you may need the right environment to harness that warrior spirit, because boxing camps are not just about technique. They're about training your mind, training your body, having the appropriate sparring, doing the right training, having the appropriate strategy for your opponent. So there's so many variables to this fight, but this fight will be exciting, and I think the public will get behind this fight. Also, the negotiation process will be important. Who is the A side? Who is the B side? Where is the venue? What will be the nuanced details? If you're Derek Chisora, would you want a bigger gloves and maybe a smaller ring or a bigger ring? There's different variables here. And of course, both fighters naturally are confident, because being a boxer, a byproduct of being a boxer, I think, is being confident. You have to be confident in your own ability. So they'll both perceive themselves to be the A side, which can be tricky when it comes to the negotiation process with regards to the economic split. But if both parties come to an agreement, then this could be a fight that can really capture the boxing public. It can capture the boxing public, but it can also capture the casual fans. So I'm hoping that this fight gets negotiated, and I think the potential for this fight is massive, whether it's the marketing and, more importantly, the actual fight.